I want to make some comment on the article that was published. SBC pastor calls Vice President Kamala Harris a Jezebel 2 days after inauguration. This is by Mark Wingfield yesterday in, what's this called? Baptist Press? Was that what it was? And I would like to read you what Tom Buck actually wrote, just so you have an idea of just how outrageous this entire attack on Pastor Buck has been. Here's what Tom wrote. I can't imagine any truly God-fearing Israelite who would have wanted their daughters to view Jezebel as an inspirational role model because she was a woman in power. Okay? Let me read it again. I can't imagine any truly God-fearing Israelite who would have wanted their daughters to view Jezebel as an inspirational role model because she was a woman in power. That is in the context of Southern Baptists actually promoting the idea of looking at Kamala Harris as a role model because she is a woman in power. So what he does is he brings from Scripture an example of a woman in power and says the Israelites would not have looked to her, even though she's a woman in power, as an example. Why? Because of her moral character. We know that she was a very evil woman. And here's what you can't say today. You see, the Bible used to make those kinds of moral judgments. We're not allowed to do that anymore. When Kamala Harris, as Attorney General of the state of California, prosecutes Mr. Daleiden and the people who caught Planned Parenthood selling baby parts, a scandal in the history of our nation, because nothing was done about it. And why was nothing done about it? Because Planned Parenthood knows where all the skeletons are buried. They own so many of our politicians that they are above the law. And they can literally sell body parts and get away with it. It is the most ghoulish, evil trafficking in innocent blood the world has ever seen, right here amongst us. And it was Kamala Harris, who is the biggest supporter of Planned Parenthood ever. As far as legislation in 2018 and 2019, since Kamala Harris came to the Senate, for whatever that time period was, any legislation that had any moral element to it whatsoever, this is a woman who has demonstrated a worldview that from a biblical perspective is absolutely debauched. It is evil on its maximum level. And so we have a woman who has promoted abortion, opposed any limitation whatsoever, to the point of even opposing the bill that would have protected children that are born alive from a botched abortion. They are to be left to die on a cold metal plate. And that's perfectly fine in Kamala Harris's world. I'm not sure Jezebel was that deeply involved in evil. This is a woman who has agreed that the Equality Act, the perversion of God's gift of gender, is a good thing. And so here you have a Southern Baptist pastor who would dare to draw from a biblical example, a historical reality of who Jezebel was, and say, I don't think the Israelites would have pointed to her as an example just because she's a woman in a place of power. In other words, you have to look at the morality of these individuals and the the worldview they're promoting. That's the issue. Jezebel brought idolatry into Israel. Kamala Harris has brought idolatry into the leadership of the United States of America. We can't say that. It's racist to say that. Evidently, there's something in history. There's something in the black community about Jezebel. I don't know what it is. But evidently, if you call somebody a Jezebel, that has some meaning amongst black people. So Tom Buck is supposed to evidently be running that kind of a filter over the Bible because his point was plain. His application was clear. That it is, he and I together are astonished at men who stand behind a pulpit in a Baptist church who cannot identify the evil of the worldview that is being promoted at the highest levels of government. We are astonished that people say, well, Trump's wife, there's pictures of her nude. Yeah, I know. And Trump was interviewed in Playboy magazine. And I've said I was honestly concerned that if the Equality Act passed and came to Trump, because, boy, there are some quote-unquote Republicans in the Senate that, whatever, I was concerned he might sign it because I felt he was very weak in that area of worldview. But the proof's in the pudding. Who did he nominate to the Supreme Court? Who did he put on the Supreme Court? Who did he nominate as judges? People who passed a litmus test to make sure to profane gender and profane marriage and profane sexuality, or the opposite? The opposite. And people can't see that? They can't recognize that? I'm astonished. Now, I looked at the feed of the author of this particular article, and it's like a New York Times article except meant for Baptists, liberal Baptists anyways, okay? And so it's not fair. It's a hit piece, and we're all going to get hit with these hit pieces. With what we're doing here in Arizona right now, we're getting hit with the hit pieces already. What do you expect? What do you expect? We do not live in a land any longer that has a free press. There's no question about that. Journalism is dead, deader than the proverbial doornail. But to see people, and let me point something out, because it's mentioned in the article, and I'll finish with this. Dwight McKissick he said in the article, will not have fellowship with Tom Buck any longer because of what he said. Think about that. Remember what he said? Don't think the people of Israel would look to Jezebel just because she was a woman in a position of power, because being a woman in a position of power is not as important as the character you bring. I won't have fellowship with you. Why? Because of a narrative, a racially motivated narrative. And that's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. Where's the division coming from? Who has changed? That perspective that Tom expressed would not have so much as, he probably wouldn't have gotten a retweet 20 years ago. But now, you write articles about it. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.